We had the most perfect weekend together, and by Tuesday, I was finding reasons to cancel our next date. Not because the weekend was bad, but because it was so good that it terrified me into retreat mode. The closer we got, the more dangerous it felt to stay that close. I'm going to show you the 5 ways to respond when she pulls away after getting closer, and why understanding her retreat is the key to bringing her back to herself. Response number 1. Recognize that her pulling away is usually about her fear, not your failure. The first and most important thing to understand when she retreats after intimacy is that the retreat is almost never about something you did wrong. When we spent that incredible weekend together, laughing until 2 a.m., sharing stories I'd never told anyone, feeling more connected than I had in years, I woke up Monday morning in complete panic. Not because you'd been anything less than perfect, but because perfect felt too good to be true. And things that feel too good to be true usually disappear. My therapist later explained this as intimacy regulation. When emotional closeness triggers a fear response because vulnerability feels too risky, causing someone to create distance to return to a more manageable comfort zone. The most helpful response when she starts pulling away: don't take it personally or try to fix what isn't broken. Instead, recognize that her retreat is likely her nervous system's way of trying to protect her from the vulnerability that comes with genuine connection. What doesn't help? Asking, "What did I do wrong?" or trying to convince her that the closeness was good. This puts pressure on her to explain feelings she probably doesn't fully understand herself. What does help? Maintaining your own emotional stability while giving her space to process. Something like, "I had an amazing time with you. I'm here when you're ready to talk. No pressure." My stomach would churn for days after pulling away because part of me knew I was sabotaging something beautiful. But I couldn't stop the protective mechanism that made distance feel safer than closeness. Understanding this first principle, that her retreat is about fear, not your inadequacy, allows you to respond from a place of compassion rather than defensiveness, which gives her the emotional safety to eventually return. But recognition alone isn't enough when someone you care about starts disappearing. Response number 2. Give her space without disappearing completely. Maintain gentle, consistent presence without pressure. The second most helpful response when she pulls away is finding the balance between respecting her need for distance and showing that your care doesn't depend on her availability. A few days after I started retreating, the most comforting thing you could do was continue being yourself without chasing me or abandoning me. When I'd take hours to respond to texts, you didn't flood me with more messages or go silent yourself. You stayed consistent, still reaching out, still being warm, but not demanding immediate reciprocation. What I needed during my retreat phase was proof that you weren't going to punish me for needing space or disappear the moment I became less accessible. The fear driving my distance was often that getting close to you meant losing my independence. So, when you showed that you could handle my temporary unavailability without becoming possessive or distant yourself, it actually made me feel safer about eventually returning. The most effective approach I experienced: occasional, low-pressure contact that didn't require response. Thinking of you, hope you're having a good day, or saw this and thought you'd laugh. Messages that showed you were still thinking of me without creating obligation to engage immediately. What doesn't work? Going completely silent, which confirms fears that closeness leads to abandonment when it becomes inconvenient. Or increasing pressure through constant contact, which confirms fears that closeness means losing autonomy. ... What works? Consistent, gentle presence that shows your feelings haven't changed, even though hers seem confused. This demonstrates emotional maturity and gives her time to work through whatever triggered her retreat. My chest would stay tight for weeks during these periods because I was simultaneously grateful for your patience and terrified that I was testing it beyond its limits. The men who could handle my retreat without making it about themselves were the ones I eventually felt safe returning to. This balance requires emotional self-regulation on your part, but it's often what determines whether her temporary distance becomes permanent withdrawal. Understanding that space and abandonment are different things allows you to give her what she needs while maintaining the connection she's temporarily unable to manage. Response number 3. Focus on your own emotional regulation rather than trying to fix her internal process. The third most helpful response when she pulls away is managing your own emotional reaction to her distance rather than trying to manage hers. When I would retreat after closeness, the men who handled it best were the ones who didn't make my processing about themselves. Instead of spending energy trying to understand or change my behavior, they focused on staying centered in their own emotional experience while remaining available for connection when I was ready. This meant not analyzing my every text for hidden meaning, not strategizing about how to win me back, and not taking my temporary unavailability as evidence that our connection wasn't real. The most attractive response was confident patience, continuing to live your life, maintain your friendships, pursue your interests, while making it clear that I was welcome to rejoin when I felt ready. What I learned to appreciate most was when someone could say, "I notice you seem to need some space right now. I care about you, and I'm not going anywhere, so take the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to connect again." This took all pressure off me to explain, justify, or hurry through my process, while reassuring me that the connection was still available. A response that never worked, making my retreat about your security, your needs, your confusion about our relationship status. When someone would say things like, "I need to know where we stand," or "this distance is making me anxious," it put me in the position of managing their emotions while I was struggling to manage my own. What worked consistently? Emotional independence that didn't depend on my consistency for stability. When you could be okay, even when I wasn't okay. It actually made me want to get okay faster because I felt safe being messy without the additional burden of worrying about how my mess was affecting you. If you're watching this because someone's pulling away has triggered your own anxiety, subscribe now. What I reveal next shows how to maintain connection without losing yourself in someone else's process. Determines whether her temporary distance becomes permanent withdrawal. Because I wasn't constantly worried about disappointing you or hurting you with my need for space. When you took care of your own emotional needs, it freed me to take care of mine without guilt. This doesn't mean being indifferent to her struggle. It means being supportive without being codependent, caring without being controlling. But emotional regulation alone isn't enough when you want to actively help someone who's retreating. Response number 4. When you do communicate, focus on reassurance rather than seeking explanation or resolution. The fourth most helpful response when she's pulling away is making your communication about her emotional safety rather than your need for understanding or closure. During my retreat phases, the most comforting interactions were when someone would check in without requiring me to explain myself or make promises about when I'd be normal again. Instead of asking, "What's wrong?" or "When can we talk about this?" the most healing conversations started with statements like, "No pressure to respond. Just want you to know I'm thinking of you." Or, "Hope you're being gentle with yourself today," What I needed during distance phases was reassurance that I was still cared about, even when I was being difficult to care for. When you could express affection without expecting it to be returned immediately, it reminded me that love could exist without constant reciprocation, which was often exactly the fear that had caused me to retreat in the first place. The most effective communication I received during these times, reassurance about your consistency. My feelings haven't changed. Validation of her process. It's okay to need time to think. And affirmation of her worth. You're worth waiting for. These messages address the core fears driving the retreat without requiring her to defend or explain her behavior. What never helped? Questions that put me in the position of having to analyze or justify my emotional state. Why are you acting like this? Did I do something? What do you need from me? When I was pulling away, it was usually because I didn't understand my own emotions well enough to explain them to someone else. What consistently helped? Statements that removed pressure while maintaining warmth. I understand you need space, and I respect that. I care about you regardless of what you're going through, and that's not going to change based on your availability. The goal of communication during her retreat shouldn't be to pull her back toward intimacy, but to create a safe emotional environment that makes returning to intimacy feel possible when she's ready. My shoulders would physically relax when I received this kind of communication because it felt like being offered emotional safety without strings attached. Exactly what I needed to work through whatever had triggered my fear of closeness. But even perfect communication has its limits when someone is deep in retreat mode. Response number 5. Know when to create your own boundaries while still leaving the door open. The fifth and most important response when she pulls away is protecting your own emotional well-being while remaining open to reconnection, which means setting limits on how long you'll wait without knowing where you stand. There came a point in my retreat patterns where I realized that some men would wait indefinitely for me to work through my fears, which actually made me feel more anxious because I knew I was taking advantage of their patience. The most helpful response was when someone could say, "I care about you, and I understand you need space. I'm happy to give you time to figure things out, but I also need to take care of myself. I'll be here for the next few weeks while you process, but after that, I'll need to know if you want to work on this together or if you need to work on it alone." This approach gave me a timeline that felt fair to both of us, while making it clear that emotional availability was valued and couldn't be taken for granted indefinitely. It showed respect for my process while also showing self-respect, which actually made you more attractive to me rather than less. What doesn't work? Ultimatums that feel punitive. If you don't figure this out by Friday, I'm done. Or endless patience that enables indefinite retreat. Take all the time you need, I'll wait forever. Both of these responses can increase anxiety rather than providing the security needed to move toward connection. What does work? Clear, compassionate boundaries that acknowledge both people's needs. I want to support you through this, and I also need to know that we're working toward the same thing. The most effective boundary setting I experienced included reassurance about your feelings, while being honest about your limits. My care for you isn't conditional on you having everything figured out, but I do need to know that you want to figure it out together, rather than alone. This approach often motivated me to push through my fear faster, because I knew that good men who were willing to be patient with my process weren't going to wait indefinitely for me to get comfortable with being loved, and I didn't want to lose someone valuable due to my own fear-based delays. My heart would race when I received this kind of boundary because it forced me to choose between my fear and my desire for connection, rather than allowing me to avoid the choice indefinitely. Setting healthy boundaries during someone's retreat phase isn't about rushing them. It's about maintaining your own emotional integrity while still offering them the space they need to choose connection when they're ready. These 5 responses reveal how to handle retreat with wisdom. When someone pulls away after getting closer, your response determines whether her temporary retreat becomes permanent withdrawal or eventual return. The pulling away isn't usually about you failing. It's about her struggling with the vulnerability that comes with genuine connection. Understanding this difference allows you to respond from a place of secure compassion rather than insecure reaction, which gives her the emotional safety she needs to work through whatever triggered her retreat. Here's what I wish someone had understood during all my retreat phases. I'm not pulling away because I don't want you. I'm pulling away because I want you so much that it scares me, and I need time to get comfortable with wanting something I'm afraid I might lose. The most helpful response to retreat isn't trying to prevent it or fix it, but creating an emotional environment where working through it feels safe and supported. Do I regret all the times I pulled away after beautiful moments? Yes, because it cost me connections with good men who deserved better than my fear-based inconsistency. Do I understand why I needed to retreat sometimes? Finally, and understanding it has helped me learn to stay present through the discomfort of vulnerability rather than running from it. Would I want someone to wait indefinitely while I work through my fears? No, because part of what helped me grow was knowing that good people wouldn't tolerate endless emotional unavailability, even when it came from fear rather than indifference. If someone you care about is currently pulling away after a period of closeness, maybe they're not rejecting what you shared together. Maybe they're trying to figure out how to handle having something that matters to them. Maybe the most loving thing you can do is show them that you can handle their struggle without making it about yourself, while also taking care of your own emotional needs. And maybe the kindest response is demonstrating that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real, and that they don't have to have everything figured out to deserve patience and understanding. But how long should someone wait while another person works through their fears? How do you balance compassion with self-respect? These questions don't have universal answers. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is set boundaries that protect both people while leaving room for growth and choice. If you want to understand more about recognizing when someone is testing you, watch my video, How to Recognize When She's Testing You and Why Understanding Matters. That video will show you exactly how to identify testing behavior and respond in ways that build trust rather than resentment.